I recently made a video about RimWorld, diving into all its chaotic brilliance, colonists losing their minds, raids gone horribly wrong, and of course, the occasional squirrel uprising. It was a fun time, but apparently I made a critical error. In the comments, a small but vocal crowd emerged, wagging their collective fingers because I didn't stop mid-video to pay homage to Dwarf Fortress. Yes, RimWorld's not-so-hidden inspiration. Why do we do this? Why is it that anytime someone talks about RimWorld, there's this weird expectation to bring up its predecessor like it's a legal requirement? So let's dive in and talk about why this kind of nitpicking is ultimately unnecessary, and frankly, exhausting. It should go without saying that RimWorld is one of my favorite games of all time. I mean, after all, it's a game where your colony might starve to death because someone forgot to butcher a squirrel, or because Barry decided to eat a fistful of raw potatoes instead of cooking them and he got food poisoning. It's a delightful mix of chaos and strategy, and you can't talk about it without someone popping up to say, "But have you played Dwarf Fortress?" Let's get one thing straight. We don't need to qualify every RimWorld discussion with a history lesson on Dwarf Fortress. Seriously, we don't do this with anything else. Imagine saying, yeah, Halo's great and all, but you have to mention Doom because Bungie clearly played it once in 1993. That would sound ridiculous, right? So why is RimWorld stuck in this endless loop of comparison? Let's start with the obvious. Yes, RimWorld was inspired by Dwarf Fortress in a variety of ways. But you know what else was inspired by something else? Literally every game ever. Games don't exist in a vacuum. Minecraft, for example, was inspired in many ways by Infiniminer. Call of Duty? It's like Medal of Honor, but with even more explosions. Yes, there was a time where Medal of Honor was the big game franchise in comparison with the two. It seems like a long time ago. And Stardew Valley? Just Harvest Moon, but with a better therapist. And if we're being honest, inspired by doesn't mean carbon copy. None of those games that I just mentioned are carbon copies of each other, but they do share inspirations. In a similar vein, RimWorld isn't just Dwarf Fortress with a UI that doesn't make you feel like you're coding in the Matrix. It's its own beast with its own systems, and its own very specific way of ensuring that everything burns down in a fiery mess. The truth is, RimWorld and Dwarf Fortress aren't even trying to do the same thing. Sure, they're both colony management sims, but that's like comparing a Rubik's Cube to chess because both involve thinking. Dwarf Fortress is a sprawling, incomprehensible masterpiece about building entire worlds from the ground up. RimWorld is a bit more streamlined and about managing colonists that might lose their minds and start punching each other over a bad meal. RimWorld focuses on storytelling and player agency through relatively streamlined mechanics. It's the video game equivalent of telling your players, here's just enough lemons to make a glass of lemonade. Meanwhile, Dwarf Fortress hands you an encyclopedia on the history of lemonade brewing and expects you to start a lemonade factory first. The problem here isn't just that people mention Dwarf Fortress, it's the weird sense of obligation around it. It's like there's this unspoken rule that you're not allowed to enjoy RimWorld without also worshipping at the altar of Tarn Adams. And don't get me wrong, Dwarf Fortress is a brilliant game, but maybe, just maybe, it's okay to enjoy RimWorld without reciting the lineage of every design choice it borrowed. Imagine if every time someone talked about Breath of the Wild, I jumped in like, actually, you have to play the original Legend of Zelda because that's where it all started. Do you know how fast people would mute me? Faster than Barry can set himself on fire in RimWorld, that's for sure. RimWorld is a fantastic game because of what it does, not because of what it borrows. It's a playground for storytelling, chaos, and experimentation. So the next time someone mentions RimWorld, let them enjoy it without dragging them into a Dwarf Fortress dissertation. And if they do want to learn about Dwarf Fortress, great. They can discover it on their own, probably while Googling games like RimWorld, but more stressful. Remember, games are meant to be played, not compared into oblivion. It's fine to discuss the similarities between games, but there shouldn't be an insistence on having to mention one whenever another comes up. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a colony to burn down with my poor decision making. Which game am I gonna play when I do that? I'll let you decide.